constant resistance as well as resistance turn support levels are all collectively known as zones. We have a zone. Okay, now I think this one we should actually move this lower one a bit. Let's move it here. Yeah, this is a better fit. At least compared to recent price action, this fits better. So that's a zone. Technically should have a zone here, but it's too far from price action. Anyways, now that we've drawn a zone, let's draw a trend line. So we could draw this trend line like this, cutting across the wicks in order to have a best fitting trend line. Or we can draw it like this. Let me look up. This is the monthly time frame, so it's always news. So let me draw the two of them actually. So based on trend line drawing rules, this is the best trend line that we can draw. But I don't really, so this will not be a monthly trend line. But at the same time, we can draw another trend line like this. This one will not be the best fitting trend line, but let's not bother. Probably we'll be able to draw it on a lower time frame. So now that we've identified our zones, we've identified our trend lines, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the lower time frame and do the same thing. So we'll go down to the 1 week time frame, we'll identify our weekly zones and our weekly trend lines. Then we'll go down to the daily time frame and identify our daily zones and our daily trend lines. So let's do that. So now we're currently on the weekly time frame. Let's zoom out a bit so we can get a better view of our zones. So where do we have zones here? Okay, we have a zone here. Let's lift it to here. Yeah, so we have a zone here. This is our weekly zone. I have a zone here. This is another weekly zone. We also have a zone here. This one is a resistance became support zone. So this is another weekly zone. So we've identified our zones. Next thing for us to do is to identify our trend lines. We could draw a trend line like this, but since I said we could draw it like this, same thing. So this is our weekly trend line. So this is our weekly trend line. Okay, so yeah, that's it. So now let's go down to our daily time frame and do the exact same thing one more time. Identify our zones and identify our trend lines. So here we have a zone here. This should technically be our all-time high, but because price is so close to it, I don't want to assume that price has already finished its impulsive move. Like I don't assume that price is already on its way down, because price could very easily just be rallying to continue rising, which is why I don't identify it as our all-time high, even though it is our current all-time high. So instead, I'll identify it as my daily zone. Okay, so I have a daily zone there. We have a daily zone here as well. We We also have a daily zone here. So now that we've identified our dailies, okay, hold on. We also have one here. So now that we've identified our daily zones, let's see if we can draw a trend line. Let's zoom out a bit. So let's see, should be possible. Okay, look at this. This is probably the best we can get for a daily trend line. But I also want to try something else. Give me a minute. Okay, so hold on. Let me try and connect these 2 points. It's not an invalid trend line. Not an invalid trend line as well. But let's just hold on to this one. I don't want to draw too many trend lines. So this is now daily trend line. So now that we've done our daily trend line, now that we've drawn our trend lines and our zones on the monthly, weekly, and daily time frame, the next thing for us to do on the daily time frame is to identify our trend origin. When you zoom out, you can see that price came from a downtrend down to this point. So this right here is our trend origin. This is our trend origin, trend origin, trend origin. Now let's identify our market structure. We have an impulsive move here, followed by a correctional, followed by an impulsive move here, followed by a correctional, followed by an impulsive, followed by a correctional, followed by a major impulsive, followed by a correctional. So presumably, this coincides a weekly zone that coincides with a daily trend line. Presumably, price is going for a new impulsive move here. So now as we've done, let's identify our swing highs and our swing lows. Since it's an uptrend, our swing highs and our swing lows will be our higher highs and our higher lows. So let's identify our higher highs with blue lines to represent buying. Let's go blue. So this is my first higher low. This is my second higher low. This is my third higher low. And then this should be my fourth higher low, but it is not yet confirmed. So I won't mark it out yet. So this is now my first higher high. Let's mark it. Let's identify it with orange. This is my second higher high. This is my third higher high. And then this is my fourth and most recent higher high. Now let's delete this guy. Okay, so now we can see that price is currently in the correctional phase. But price seems to already be making that switch from correctional phase to an impulsive phase. So what are we going to do? We're going to, let's make it blue. So we're going to go to every of our blue lines, and by our blue lines I'm referring to our higher lows. That is the lowest point that price got to before switching from a correctional move to an impulsive move, because we're trying to catch the next impulsive move. So we'll go down to all of our blue lines, which is the blue boxes that I have just circled on. Which are the blue boxes I circled on. We'll go down to them on the 4-hour time frame and see if there are any specific price patterns that appear. And if there are, those price patterns will end up being an indicator for the start of the next impulsive move. Okay, so let's zoom out first. Let's zoom out as much as we can to make it easier to go back. Okay. Okay, so now I've zoomed in. So this is the first blue box, which is our first higher low. So switching to the line chart, are there any specific price patterns that appear before price switches from a correctional move to an impulsive move? We actually have a W pattern here. Not only do we have a W pattern here, we have, this is the W pattern actually. But even though it looks very odd, it still counts as a W pattern. So we have a W pattern here. We even have another one here. We even have another W pattern here. Not long after that, price went impulsive. There's even a third one, but let's not bother. Now we go down to the second one. What do we see? We see another W pattern. It's just that this W pattern looks a little bit different from the other one. The first W pattern had the first leg lower than the second leg. The first W pattern here had the first leg lower than the second leg. The second W pattern has the second leg lower than the first leg, but we still have a W pattern. Next, we don't even have a W pattern here, at least not at the lowest point. Let's switch to the line chart. So there's no W pattern at the lowest point that price gets to, but we have a W pattern like this. So there is a W pattern, but the W pattern does not appear at the lowest point that price gets to. But there is still a W pattern that appears. So let's now return to our most recent price action. So switching to the line chart, what do we see? Do we see any W patterns? I do actually see a W pattern. I see a W pattern here. Excuse me. I see a W pattern here. Not only do I see a W pattern here, I see a pattern within a pattern. That is to say, let me draw it a second time to express what I'm trying to say. I see this price came down like this. When price came down for the second time, price formed a smaller W pattern. So we have a W pattern contained inside of it. We have a smaller W pattern contained inside of a larger W pattern. But then that's not all I see at this point. I also see shoulder, head, shoulder. So we have an inverse head and shoulder that ends with a W pattern. That ends with a W pattern contained within a larger W pattern, or a W pattern that contains a smaller W pattern. So in other words, we have seen our, what I call it, our entry signal. That's telling us to buy. If we even come here, okay, this one doesn't count as a W pattern. This one is more triple bottoms. Okay, no, this is actually a, does it count? It doesn't really count. But it does look like a W pattern because there are 3 points that get to that same loop. Okay, technically, if we're going specifically by the rules of W pattern, technically there's a W pattern here because you can see the low, the high here is different from the one here. Do you get? So we can call this a W pattern, we can also call this a triple bottom. But ultimately, what I see is that we have seen our entry somewhere around here. Sorry about that. That's our most appropriate entry somewhere around there based on the signal. And then our targets, since price is switching from the correctional phase to an impulsive phase, we're expecting price to at least get here. This is our barest minimum expectation. We're expecting price to get here. But at the same time, I'm going to use a different one. Here, right about here, and then should be expecting